Karen's signature on invoices from companies that didn't exist, including $200,000 for landscaping services from a company registered to Karen's brother for work that was never performed. The room erupted in gasps and angry mutters. Karen lunged for my laptop, but I stepped back, continuing calmly, "I have satellite images showing no landscape changes during these supposed improvements." I clicked through more evidence. Inflated invoices, personal expenses charged to the HOA, and suspicious bank transfers. "That's all lies," Karen screeched, her composure cracking. "I've managed this community perfectly for years. Who are you to question my authority?" She turned to Sarah for support, but Sarah was already inching toward the exit. I projected the next slide, security footage showing Karen and Sarah entering the HOA office at 2 a.m. last week, removing boxes of documents. "The state investigators have copies of everything I announced. They're very interested in the pattern of selective enforcement and personal enrichment." An elderly resident stood up, pointing his cane at Karen. "Is this why you fined me for my medical ramp while approving your own unauthorized pool renovation?" Others joined in, sharing stories of harassment and unfair treatment. Karen's face twisted with rage as she realized her empire was crumbling. She grabbed her designer purse and rushed toward the door, nearly knocking over Mr. Rodriguez in his wheelchair, but two stern-looking individuals in suits blocked her exit. "Mrs. Thompson," one of them said, holding up a badge, "We're from the State Housing Authority. We'd like to ask you some questions about these financial discrepancies." I turned back to the stunned residents, my voice firm but kind. "This meeting isn't over. We have a lot of work to do to restore transparency and fairness to our community." I glanced at my watch, knowing that in exactly 1 hour the local news van would arrive. What I didn't know was that Karen had one more devastating trick up her sleeve, one that would test our entire community's resolve. My Monday started with panic at 6 a.m. I rushed outside in my pajamas to find my driveway empty. My car was gone. The same driveway I'd parked in for 3 years was suddenly marked as a no parking zone with fresh yellow paint that looked wet. My heart raced as I checked my security cameras, and what I saw made my blood boil. The footage showed Karen and Sarah sneaking around at 3 a.m. like teenagers, pulling a prank. Sarah kept watch while Karen painted the curb yellow, then slapped a fake violation notice on my front door. An hour later, their friend Tony from Quick Tow trucked away my car while they watched from Karen's Tesla parked across the street. I took deep breaths and remembered what my lawyer said: document everything. I grabbed my phone and snapped pictures of the wet paint, my empty driveway, and close-ups of their boot prints in my morning damp grass. The neighborhood was quiet, except for Mr. Rodriguez, who wheeled over to show me a video he'd taken from his window. "Look what else they did last night," he whispered, holding up his phone. The shaky footage showed Karen and Sarah going house to house, putting violation notices on doors of everyone who had spoken up at the meeting. They even knocked over Mrs. Patterson's mailbox. She's the retired judge who had asked tough questions about the missing money. I called the police, but Karen had beaten me to it. She'd already filed complaints about unauthorized vehicles in the neighborhood. The young officer seemed bored until I showed him my auditor badge and their security footage. His eyes went wide and he started taking real notes. More neighbors came out as the morning went on. The Johnsons found their garden destroyed, the same garden that had won awards and made our community look good in real estate photos. The Patel's kids were crying because someone had removed their basketball hoop overnight, even though it had proper approval. Every single person who had questioned the board at the meeting got hit with some kind of violation. I was getting ready to call my lawyer when my phone buzzed with texts from other homeowners. Sarah was going door to door telling everyone I was under investigation for stealing HOA funds. She was waving around papers that looked official but had no letterhead or signatures. The lies were getting bigger, but so was our evidence pile. By noon, I had set up a shared online folder where neighbors could upload their photos, videos, and stories. Karen didn't know it, but she had just turned our quiet community into a team of investigators. Even teenage Billy from down the street offered to help, showing me his drone footage of Karen's brother landscaping company dumping waste in our community garden at night. The final straw came when Sarah posted signs around the pool calling for an emergency meeting to vote me out of the neighborhood. The signs included my private employment history with mistakes that could only have come from illegally accessing my personal records. I smiled, knowing they just handed me proof of privacy law violations. That evening I sat in my home office surrounded by evidence, security footage, financial records, neighbor statements, photo of illegal changes to our property, and now proof of privacy breaches. My hands shook as I typed up everything for my lawyer. Outside I could hear Karen's Tesla cruising by my house. For the 4th time that day my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number: back off or worse things will happen. It read. I took a screenshot, adding it to my growing file. They thought they were sending a threat, but they had just given me more proof. Looking at the boxes of evidence spread across my desk, I wondered what tomorrow would bring and how many more laws they would break trying to silence the truth. I knew the morning would be different when I saw 3 news vans parked outside our community gates. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the thick manila envelope containing my final audit report. Inside were hundreds of Pages of evidence showing exactly how Karen and her friends had been stealing from us for years. The reporter from Channel 5 spotted me first. Is it true the HOA board spent $50,000 on a private party at Karen Thompson's house, calling it a community event that none of the residents were invited to? She asked, shoving a microphone in my face. I stayed quiet, but my small smile told her everything. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Rodriguez. Karen's brother just confessed he's at the police station right now. I rushed to my computer and watched the live stream. Tom Thompson, Karen's brother, was crying as he admitted to creating fake landscaping bills for work that was never done. He told the police how Karen had threatened to destroy his business if he didn't help her steal from the HO. Suddenly my security camera app sent an alert. I watched in disbelief as Karen's white Tesla screeched into the HOA office parking lot. She ran inside wearing her designer workout clothes, but something was different. Her perfect hair was messy, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. Through my office window, I could see her frantically deleting files from the computer. I called Detective Martinez, who had been investigating our case. She's destroying evidence right now, I whispered. I'm watching it on the security camera. He told me to stay put and record everything. Sarah, Karen's faithful sidekick, showed up next. She was carrying empty boxes and trying to look casual, but the security camera caught her stealing documents from the filing cabinets. I remembered how she used to brag about having a key to the office because she was so important. My neighbor Lisa from 2 doors down called in tears. You were right about everything, she sobbed. Karen made me pay a $2,000 fine last year because my daughter's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore. I just found out they owed that money for their spa day. The police arrived with lights flashing but no sirens. Karen tried to run, but she tripped over her own designer handbag as they put her in handcuffs. She screamed, "Don't you know who I am? My husband plays golf with the mayor." But the mayor himself was already there, looking disgusted as he watched his former friend being arrested. Sarah tried to blame everything on Karen, but the security footage showed her stealing documents at midnight. When the police caught her, she was trying to stuff papers into her gym bag behind the dumpster. I was just organizing, she claimed, but nobody believed her anymore. More neighbors came out to watch. Mrs. Peterson, who lost her garden because Karen said it wasn't fancy enough, was recording everything on her phone. Mr. Rodriguez sat in his wheelchair on his front porch smiling as he watched karma finally catch up to the people who had bullied him about his ramp. The news helicopters circled overhead as police carried out box after box of evidence. Someone found a secret drawer in Karen's desk filled with cash and gift cards she had stolen from our holiday donation drive for the local children's hospital. Just when I thought it was over, my phone rang. It was the state attorney's office. We've been investigating HOA fraud across the county. The attorney said your evidence just helped us crack open 5 other cases. How would you like to help us shut down more corrupt HOA boards? I looked out my window at Karen sitting in the police car, still yelling at everyone. She caught my eye and finally recognized me, not just as the homeowner with the rose garden she hated, but as the auditor who had brought her whole corrupt world crashing down. Her face turned pale as she realized that every mean thing she had done to us had only made me work harder to expose her crimes. As the police cars drove away, my neighbors started clapping. Someone hung a banner that read, "Our community, our rules." But I knew this wasn't just about winning, it was about making things right, and tomorrow we would start rebuilding our neighborhood without fear or bullies. The reporters wanted interviews, but I just smiled and walked back inside. After all, I had a meeting scheduled with the state attorney's office and 5 more corrupt HOA boards to investigate. I wondered which one would be stupid enough to test me next. I walked into the emergency HOA meeting, my heart pounding as I faced a room packed with angry neighbors. The local news van was parked outside, cameras rolling. Karen sat at the board table, her designer blazer wrinkled from a sleepless night, frantically whispering to her lawyer. Sarah wasn't even there. She was probably still trying to explain to the police why security cameras caught her removing boxes of documents at midnight. The state investigators had sealed off the HOA office. They found shredded papers everywhere, but Karen wasn't as smart as she thought. She'd forgotten about the digital backups I'd secured weeks ago. Every fake invoice, every suspicious payment, every deleted email. I had copies of everything. Mr. Rodriguez wheeled himself to the front row, smiling at me for the first time in months. His grandson had helped him remove the violation notices Karen had plastered all over his wheelchair ramp, the same ramp she tried to find him $5,000 for while secretly approving her own $25,000 pool renovation with HOA money. Before we begin, I announced, pulling out my laptop, I'd like to share some interesting numbers with everyone. Karen's face turned ghostly white as I connected to the projector. Over the past 3 years, our HOA fees have tripled. Let's look at exactly where that money went. The room gasped as I showed the first slide, a photo of Karen's brother's landscaping company office. It was just an empty storefront, but it had somehow received $400,000 for services. Next came the bank statements showing transfers to accounts linked to Karen's personal businesses, then the footage from my security camera of Sarah and Karen placing fake violation notices at 3 a.m. You can't prove anything, Karen suddenly stood up, her voice shaking. "This is a witch hunt. I've served this community for 15 years. That's when her brother walked in. He looked terrified, clutching a folder. "I can't do this anymore, Karen," he said. "I'm not going to jail for you." He handed the folder to the state investigator. Every fake invoice, every kickback documented. Karen lunged for the folder, but 2 police officers stepped forward. "They'd been waiting quietly in the back, Mrs. Thompson," one said. "We need you to come with us." The room erupted in chaos as they led her out, reading her rights. The next few hours were a blur of reporters, investigators, and shocked neighbors sharing their own stories of Karen's abuse of power. Sarah was arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico. The evidence kept piling up: fake fines, personal purchases with HOA funds, kickbacks from contractors. A week later, we held elections for a new board. I nominated Mr. Rodriguez for president, and he won unanimously. His first act, reducing the monthly fees to $800 and creating an oversight committee to review all expenses. His grandson helped set up a public website where every penny spent is tracked. My roses are blooming again. Turns out they were never actually against HOA rules. Karen had made that up because she was mad I'd questioned her brother's inflated landscaping bills. Mr. Rodriguez's wheelchair ramp was approved properly, and we used the recovered funds to install similar accessibility features throughout the community. The local news did a follow-up story. They found 5 other HOAs where Karen and Sarah had pulled similar schemes. The FBI got involved yesterday. I watched them load box after box of evidence from Karen's house. Her Tesla was seized as evidence. Turns out she'd bought it with embezzled HOA funds. As I sit on my porch today sipping coffee and watching kids play freely in their yards without fear of random fins, I can't help but smile. The property values are actually going up now that we have honest leadership. We're planning a community garden where Karen's brother's fake landscaping company used to dump mulch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's making things right. But I still keep all my receipts just in case. After all, the best defense against corruption is an organized spreadsheet and a good security camera. Karen and Sarah's trial starts next month. They're facing serious prison time for embezzlement, fraud, and harassment. But the real victory: our community finally feels like home again, and my morning coffee tastes so much better without those ridiculous HOA fees. Karen and Sarah were coming back early from lunch. I quickly slipped the papers back into place, but left a tiny thread from my sweater sticking out of the file. I needed to know if they would check these records. After I left the next morning, the thread was gone, and suddenly all the board members were acting super nice to me. Karen even brought me coffee and suggested I take a few days off to rest. She had no idea that I'd already made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different places. Just as I was leaving that day, a certified letter arrived for the HOA. I signed for it since I was there and nearly dropped it when I saw it was from the State Housing Authority. They wanted to audit our books too. Seems someone had tipped them off about unusually high fee increases in our neighborhood. Karen came running out of her office when she heard my gasp, her face white as a sheet. I gathered my things to head home, wondering how long it would take her to realize I wasn't just a regular auditor. I was also the one who had contacted the housing authority 3 weeks ago. Walking to my car, I spotted Sarah and Karen having a heated whisper. "Be near the pool." Karen slapped a folder into Sarah's chest and pointed toward the officer. Face her with anger. I smiled, knowing tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. I was reviewing HOA bank statements at my kitchen table when I heard crying outside my window. Mr. Rodriguez, my 78-year-old neighbor, was sitting in his wheelchair at the bottom of his front steps holding a bright red violation notice. I rushed outside to help him. "They're finding me $5,000 for my wheelchair ramp," he sobbed, his weathered hands shaking. "My son built it last month when I came home from the hospital. I can't get in my house without it." The notice had Karen's signature along with a threat to place a lien on his house if he didn't pay within 30 days. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "May I take photos of this notice, Mr. Rodriguez?" The date on the violation matched perfectly with something suspicious I'd found earlier: a $115,000 payment to Thompson Pool Services for Karen's backyard renovation. While helping Mr. Rodriguez up his ramp, I noticed Sarah peeking through her curtains next door, phone in hand. She was probably calling Karen right now. Perfect, let them worry. I invited Mr. Rodriguez inside for coffee and pulled out my laptop. "Look at this." I showed him the property maps I downloaded from the county website. "Your ramp follows ADA guidelines exactly. They can't find you for following federal law." His eyes lit up with hope as I explained how the Fair Housing Act protected his rights. Just then my phone buzzed with texts from 3 other neighbors. Each had a similar story: massive fines for violations that appeared right after they questioned the fee increase. One had been fined $800 for having a potted plant too close to their mailbox. Another got hit with $200 for wind chimes that were excessively noisy. I heard the unmistakable purr of Karen's new Tesla pulling up outside through my window, I watched her strut across my front yard in her designer heels, snapping photos of my rose bushes with her iPhone, her face twisted into a smirk as she typed something on her phone, probably another violation notice. Mr. Rodriguez gripped my hand. "I can't lose my house," he whispered. "All my memories with my late wife are here." I squeezed his hand back, my mind racing through state laws about HOA board member responsibilities I'd found enough evidence of financial mismanagement to justify a full investigation, but I needed more proof of their targeted harassment pattern. "What if we fight back?" I asked, opening my email to show him something interesting. "Remember last month's community newsletter? Karen bragged about her new pool and gave a shout out to her brother's company for the amazing work. But look at these invoices. I found the dates, amounts, and signatures don't match up." Mr. Rodriguez leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "My grandson is a reporter for the local news," he said quietly. "He's been looking for a story about HOA abuse." Just then my security camera app pinged. Sarah was in my backyard measuring my rose bushes with a tape measure, her phone recording everything. I smiled. She had no idea she was helping me document their harassment campaign. I picked my phone to record a video of my own, ready to help me gather some evidence. Mr. Rodriguez, his determined nod, said everything. We watched as Karen joined Sarah in my backyard, both of them too busy plotting their next attack to notice my security cameras, catching their every move. What they didn't know was that tomorrow's board meeting would change everything, and I had a copy of every questionable transaction they'd ever signed. Let them write their fake violations. Each one was another nail in their own coffin. I helped Mr. Rodriguez back to his house. Just as the sun was setting through my kitchen window, I could see Karen and Sarah huddled on Sarah's porch, furiously whispering and pointing at my house. Let them plot. I had mountains of evidence and a whole community ready to back me up. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. My heart was pounding as I walked into the crowded community center for the quarterly HOA meeting. The room buzzed with angry whispers about the recent fee increases. Karen stood at the podium in her designer suit, tapping her manicured nails on the wooden surface while checking her phone. I clutched my leather briefcase containing 3 months of damning evidence, taking my usual seat in the back row as your board president. Karen's voice dripped with fake sweetness. "I must announce additional essential fee increases to maintain our community standards." She clicked through a slideshow of poorly edited photos showing supposed violations around the neighborhood. I recognized my rose garden among them, labeled as an eyesore requiring professional intervention. Sarah, her faithful sidekick, nodded enthusiastically from her front row seat, shooting me a smug look. I watched her scribble notes, probably plotting more fake violations to report. The same Sarah who'd been photographed by my security camera sneaking around my property at midnight last week. My neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, grabbed my hand, her eyes filling with tears. "They're going to make me sell my house," she whispered. "I can't afford another increase." I squeezed her hand back, knowing my moment had finally come. Karen clicked to a slide showing a $50,000 proposal for new security measures, coincidentally from her husband's company. That was the last straw. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. "Before we vote on any increases," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need to make an announcement." I walked to the front, pulling out my official auditor badge. "For the past 3 months I've been serving as your external auditor appointed by the State Housing Authority." Karen's face turned ghost white. Sarah's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. No one moved to clean it up. I connected my laptop to the projector, bringing up my findings. "I've uncovered $800,000 in questionable transactions over the past 2 years." My first slide showed. Picture this: I nearly choked on my morning coffee when I saw my HOA fees suddenly skyrocket to $320 a month while watching the board president Karen cruise around in her new Tesla bought with our money. But what these corrupt HOA tyrants didn't realize was that I had just become their new external auditor, and they had left a perfect paper trail of their schemes. How much evidence would I need to collect before I could take them all down? Comment below where you're watching from. The thick envelope from the HOA felt heavier than usual in my hands. That morning I'd been living in Oaked Estates for 5 peaceful years, tending to my prize, winning roses, and keeping to myself. That peace shattered the moment I pulled out the notice. My monthly HOA fees were tripling to $320 effective in just 30 days. My hands shook as I read the letter again. Coffee forgotten on my kitchen counter. Through my window, I watched Karen Thompson, our HOA board president, strutting down the sidewalk in her designer workout gear, seemingly inspecting everyone's front yards with her usual look of disapproval. She paused at my property line, pulling out her phone to snap pictures of my rose garden while shaking her head. "Just last week she left a note claiming my roses were unsightly and reducing property values." These were the same roses that had won the county gardening competition 3 years running. I took a deep breath, remembering the email I'd received yesterday but hadn't opened yet. My confirmation as the HOA's new external auditor. The sound of screeching tires pulled me from my thoughts. Sarah, Karen's right-hand woman on the board, had just called the towing company on old Mr. Rodriguez's grandson's car. The poor kid had been helping install a wheelchair ramp for his grandfather, but apparently the work truck was an eyesore according to Sarah's loud phone conversation outside my window. I carefully tucked the fee increase notice into my home office folder right next to my certified auditor credentials and the last 6 months of questionable HOA financial statements. I'd been quietly collecting the numbers hadn't added up for a while. New landscaping charges appearing monthly despite our dying community garden, mysterious maintenance fees for non-existent repairs, and now this massive increase with only vague explanations about property improvements. Walking to my mailbox later that morning, I overheard Karen bragging to another board member about her new Tesla and upcoming kitchen renovation. Strange considering she just lost her job at the real estate agency last month. Not that I was supposed to know that working in financial auditing gives you AC for no ing these kinds of details. My neighbor Lisa hurried over looking nervous. Did you get the notice too? She whispered, glancing over her shoulder. They threatening to put a lien on my house if I can't pay the increase, but I'm a single mom, there's no way I can afford this. Her voice cracked as she held back tears. That's when Karen's Tesla rolled up beside us. Ladies, she called out sweetly through her open window, I hope you're discussing the exciting new changes coming to our community. We're installing a state-of-the-art security system next week. The cameras will help us better monitor property violations. Her eyes lingered on my roses before she drove away. I smiled, knowing exactly what kind of security system she meant. I'd seen the $50,000 invoice in last month's financial records, the company providing it owned by her brother, charging 3 times the market rate. The same brother whose landscaping company somehow won every HOA contract without any competitive bids. Walking back inside, I pulled out my laptop and opened my work email. There it was, official confirmation of my role as the HOA's external auditor starting next week. My hands weren't shaking anymore as I typed my acceptance reply. Karen had no idea that her perfect little kingdom was about to face its first real audit in 5 years. A knock at my door startled me. It was Mr. Rodriguez, leaning heavily on his cane holding a violation notice. They're making me tear out the half-finished ramp, he said, his voice trembling. They say it doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. My grandson can't help me anymore. They banned his truck. How will I even get to my doctor's appointments? I looked past him at Karen's house, where a team of workers was installing a massive unapproved fountain in her front yard. Beyond that, I could see Sarah measuring my rose bushes with a ruler, violation notebook in hand. Time to start taking my own pictures. Don't worry, Mr. Rodriguez, I said, helping him to a chair on my porch. Things around here are about to change. Would you mind telling me more about these violations? I'd like to document everything. I pulled out my voice recorder, watching as Karen's fountain workers accidentally cracked a driveway with their truck. Funny how that violation would never make it into the HOA records. I just needed to stay quiet for more days, 1 week, until my first official audit meeting, where I'd have access to every financial record, every board decision, every violation notice from the past 5 years. Karen and her crew had no idea that their carefully constructed house of cards was sitting right next to my rose garden, and I had just the evidence to make it all come tumbling down. The question was, how many more neighbors would they crush before I could expose everything? My hands were sweating as I walked into the HOA office for my first day as their auditor. Karen's fake smile dropped when I asked to see 5 years of financial records. Oh, those old things, they're probably in storage somewhere, she said, twirling her designer handbag. I knew right then she was hiding something big. I spent the next week digging through dusty boxes in the basement. The mess of papers looked random, but I noticed something weird. Every single landscaping bill was from Thompson Brothers LC. A quick Google search showed this company belonged to Karen's brother, and they were charging us triple the normal price for basic lawn work. While I was making copies of these sketchy bills, Sarah burst into the office. What are you doing here so late? She snapped, trying to peek at my papers. I calmly showed her my auditor badge and watched her face turn pale. That night, I found 3 violation notices on my door, one for my garbage can being an inch too close to the curb. The next morning I noticed something even stranger. The HOA had paid $50,000 for emergency tree removal last summer, but when I checked old Google Maps images of our neighborhood, not a single large tree was missing. I started asking neighbors about it. Old Mrs. Jenkins remembered something about Karen's brother's company doing tree work that only took an hour. I created a spreadsheet of every weird payment. I found the numbers were shocking: $800 for painting a single fire hydrant when $200 monthly for special security patrols that nobody had ever seen, and $55,000 for holiday decorations that never appeared. Every overpriced job went to companies connected to Karen or her friends. Things got really interesting when I found a stack of resident complaints that had been marked resolved, but never actually fixed. Mr. Rodriguez's wheelchair ramp request was denied 3 times for aesthetic reasons, while Karen got instant approval for her backyard tiki bar that clearly broke building codes. I was carefully photographing these documents when I heard voices in the hallway.